Welcome back to AI Draws the World. Tonight, our pen plotter will slowly bring Las Vegas to life, one line at a time. As the lights of the strip appear on the page, I'll tell you a story set in the summer of 1999. It begins with a young man named Daniel Mercer, a faded postcard, and a message written 15 years earlier. If you're ever lost, meet me where the lights never sleep. What starts as a simple trip to Las Vegas soon becomes a hunt for hidden tunnels, forgotten casinos, secret ledgers, and a mystery his father spent a lifetime protecting. So sit back, relax, and enjoy watching this drawing come together as we uncover the secret of the Silver Ace. And remember, sometimes the smallest object can open the biggest door. Let's begin. The Secret of the Silver Ace, a Las Vegas adventure. Chapter 1, The Postcard. The postcard had been in Daniel Mercer's life for 15 years. It was bent at the corners, faded by sunlight, and soft from being handled too many times. The front showed the famous Welcome to Las Vegas sign glowing against a deep blue desert sky. The back had only one sentence written in black ink. If you're ever lost, meet me where the lights never sleep. There was no signature, no return address, no explanation. Daniel had received it 1 week after his father's funeral. He was 10 years old then, too young to understand why adults lowered their voices when they talked about his father, too young to know why his mother cried every time someone mentioned Las Vegas, too young to ask the right questions. Now he was 25, old enough to know that silence usually meant someone was hiding something. He sat alone on a bus rolling through the Nevada desert in the summer of 1999, the postcard resting between his fingers. Outside the window, the land stretched flat and empty under a burning orange sunset. The city was still miles away, but Daniel could already see a faint glow on the horizon. Las Vegas. His father had loved that city. At least, that was what Daniel had been told. Thomas Mercer had worked construction, security, and odd casino jobs before Daniel was born. He knew dealers, performers, hotel managers, stagehands, and people who never gave their real names. But after Daniel's birth, Thomas left Nevada and almost never spoke about it again. Except once. Daniel remembered standing in the garage while his father fixed an old radio. Daniel had asked him why he kept a silver casino token in a wooden box. His father had smiled, wiped grease from his hands with an old towel, and lifted the coin into the light. That little coin, Thomas said, is proof that sometimes the smallest thing can open the biggest door. Daniel had asked what door. His father winked. One day maybe I'll show you. He never did. 3 months later, Thomas Mercer was gone. For 15 years, Daniel tried to live with half answers. He finished school, worked small jobs, helped his mother, and told himself that every family had stories with missing pieces. But after his mother passed away that spring, he found a second envelope hidden inside a shoebox in her closet. Inside was a bus ticket to Las Vegas, purchased years earlier and never used. Written across the ticket sleeve were 6 words. He wanted you to go someday, so Daniel went. The bus crossed the final stretch of desert, just as night settled over Nevada. Then, almost suddenly, Las Vegas appeared. It did not rise from the desert like a normal city. It exploded from it. Neon signs flashed. Hotel towers glowed. Searchlights moved through the sky. The strip looked like a river of electricity flowing through the darkness. Daniel saw pyramids, castles, towers, fountains, signs, and buildings shaped like dreams people had after staying awake too long. The passengers around him stirred. Some pressed their faces to the windows. Some laughed. Some cheered. Daniel stayed quiet. He looked at the postcard again. All right, he whispered. I'm here. The bus station smelled like coffee, cigarette smoke, hot pavement, and perfume. Daniel stepped down with one duffel bag over his shoulder and the postcard tucked carefully inside his jacket pocket. A taxi took him toward a small motel just off the strip. The driver was an older man with a white mustache and a voice like gravel. First time in Vegas? The driver asked. Daniel looked out at the lights. Is it that obvious? You keep looking up, the driver said. Locals look straight ahead. First-timers look up. Daniel smiled faintly. I guess I'm a first-timer. You here for luck? Daniel touched the postcard in his pocket. I'm here for answers. The driver glanced at him in the mirror, but said nothing for a moment. Then he nodded. Vegas has plenty of both. Luck and answers. Trouble is, they don't always come separate. The motel was old, 2 floors, pink stucco walls, humming ice machine, flickering vacancy sign. Daniel checked in under a yellow lamp while a ceiling fan clicked overhead. His room was plain. 1 bed, 1 table, 1 lamp, 1 painting of a desert road going nowhere. Daniel dropped his bag beside the bed and placed the postcard on the table. For the first time all day, he wondered if he had made a mistake. What was he doing here? Chasing a postcard? Following a message from a dead man? He sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his tired eyes. Then he heard something at the door. A soft scrape, like paper sliding over carpet. Daniel froze. He walked slowly across the room and opened the door. No one was there. The walkway outside was empty, but on the floor was a white envelope. His name was written across the front, Daniel Mercer. His breath caught. He picked it up and looked both ways down the motel walkway. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Only traffic humming from the strip. He shut the door and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message was typed. Tomorrow at noon. Stand beneath the Eiffel Tower. Bring the postcard. Do not be late. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he looked out the window toward the strip. In the distance, the Eiffel Tower replica at the Paris Hotel glowed gold against the night sky. For 15 years, Daniel had wondered whether the postcard meant anything. Now he had his answer. Someone had been waiting for him, and whoever it was knew exactly when he had arrived. Chapter 2: Arrival on the Strip. Daniel did not sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the envelope sliding beneath the motel door. Every sound from the walkway made him sit up. Every passing car seemed to slow too long outside his room. By morning his eyes burned, but his mind was awake in a way it had not been for years. At 11:30, he walked toward the strip under a white-hot sun. Las Vegas looked different in daylight. At night, the city felt magical. In the morning, it looked like the magic had been built from steel, glass, concrete, wires, and stubborn imagination. But even in daylight, the place had power. Tourists crossed sidewalks with cameras around their necks. Buses hissed at curbs. Taxi drivers shouted. Music spilled from casinos. Men handed out flyers. A woman in a feathered costume posed for photos. Somewhere nearby, coins rattled inside a slot machine. Daniel kept one hand on the postcard in his pocket. The Paris Hotel towered above him, its Eiffel Tower rising into the sky like a piece of Europe dropped into the desert. At exactly noon, Daniel stood beneath it. He expected someone mysterious, a man in a dark suit, a woman with sunglasses, maybe someone who had known his father. Instead, for 10 minutes, nothing happened. People walked past him. A child spilled soda. A man asked Daniel to take a picture of him and his wife. A street performer painted silver stood perfectly still until someone dropped $1 in his bucket. Daniel checked his watch. 12:14. He was about to leave when an elderly man sat down beside him on a stone bench. "You look just like him," the old man said. Daniel turned. "Excuse me." "Thomas Mercer," the man said. "Your father." Daniel stood quickly. "Who are you?" The old man looked up calmly. "My name is Elias Vale. Your father saved my life in 1974. Daniel felt the air leave his chest. "You knew my father?" "Better than most. Not as well as I should have." "Did you send the envelope?" Elias nodded. "And the postcard?" "No," Elias said. "Your father arranged that." Daniel pulled the postcard from his pocket. What does it mean? Elias looked at the postcard with a strange sadness. It means your father trusted you. With what? With something people have searched for since before you were born. Daniel almost laughed. You're telling me my father left some kind of treasure hunt? Not treasure. Not exactly. What then? A secret. Daniel studied him. What kind of secret? Elias leaned closer. The kind that men lie for, steal for, sometimes die for. Daniel's first instinct was to walk away. This sounded insane. It sounded like a movie his father would have laughed at. But then Elias reached into his jacket and removed a small velvet pouch. He placed it in Daniel's hand. Inside was a silver casino token. On one side was an ace of spades. On the other were the words, "The Silver Ace, Las Vegas, Nevada, 1947. Daniel's throat tightened. My father had one like this. Yes, Elias said. His was the key. This is only the first clue. Daniel looked at the token. What is the Silver Ace? A casino that no longer exists. It stood near Fremont Street before the big resorts swallowed Old Vegas. Back then, the Silver Ace was small, private, and very dangerous. Dangerous how? Elias did not answer directly. Your father discovered that the casino had a hidden room. Inside that room was a ledger. Names, payments, land deals, bribes, missing money. Proof of how parts of early Las Vegas were really built. And he kept it. He hid it. Why? Because the wrong people wanted it destroyed. Daniel shook his head. My father was a construction worker. He was more than that. Daniel looked toward the casino doors, toward people laughing, gambling, drinking, living like the world was simple. My father never told me any of this. He wanted you safe. Then why bring me here now? Elias looked older suddenly, because the last person who knew where the ledger might be died 2 months ago. My mother, Daniel said quietly. Elias nodded. She kept your father's secret longer than any of us. Daniel stepped back. You knew my mother? I knew she was protecting you. Daniel closed his hand around the token. What am I supposed to do? Elias pointed his cane toward the strip. Follow the clues your father left. Why me? Because the final lock was made for family. What happens if I say no? Elias looked toward the fountains in the distance. Then the secret stays buried, and the men who ruined your father's life win. Daniel looked down at the silver token again. The ace of spades caught the sunlight. For 15 years, he had wondered who his father really was. Now the first answer sat in his palm. Elias stood slowly. Your next clue is where water dances but never drinks. The Bellagio Fountains, Daniel said. Elias smiled. Good. Your father said you were sharp. Daniel looked up. What do I look for? Elias handed him a folded paper. On it was a short riddle. Where water dances but never drinks, seek the lion who guards the stone. Beneath his paw lies what was hidden, waiting for the sun alone. Daniel read it twice. When he looked up, Elias was already walking away. Wait, Daniel called. How do I find you again? Elias stopped and looked back. You don't. Not yet. Then he disappeared into the crowd beneath the Eiffel Tower. Daniel stood alone under the hot Nevada sun, holding a silver token from a dead casino and a riddle from a father who had been gone 15 years. Across the street, the Bellagio Fountains began to rise. Chapter 3: The Bellagio Clue. The Bellagio had opened less than a year earlier, and people still talked about it like it was impossible. A palace in the desert, a lake in front of a hotel, fountains that danced to music. Daniel crossed the strip with hundreds of tourists and walked toward the water. The fountains were quiet when he arrived, but the lake shimmered under the afternoon sun. The hotel rose behind it, elegant and massive, with arched windows and cream-colored walls. He read the riddle again. Where water dances but never drinks, seek the lion who guards the stone. He looked around. There were statues, planters, signs, columns, and tourists everywhere, but no obvious lion. He walked along the front of the property until he found a stone planter near one of the entrances. At its base were decorative carved lion heads, their mouths open, their paws resting on the edge of the stone. Daniel knelt casually, pretending to tie his shoe. Beneath one paw was a small metal plate, nearly hidden by dust. His heart began to pound. He pressed it. Nothing happened. He pressed harder. A small click. A narrow compartment opened under the planter edge. Inside was a rolled strip of paper wrapped in wax cloth. Daniel took it quickly and stood. A security guard near the door glanced in his direction. Daniel walked away without running. He reached a shaded area near the lake before unrolling the paper. It was a drawing. Not a map exactly. More like a sketch of the strip as it might have looked years earlier, before the Bellagio, before the giant hotels, before Las Vegas became what it was now. At the bottom was another message in his father's handwriting. Daniel recognized it instantly from old birthday cards. Danny, if you found this, you already know enough to be in danger. But you also know enough to keep going. The city changes its face, but it never forgets its bones. Find old Vegas beneath the lights. Start where the ceiling became the sky. Dad. Daniel read the words again. Danny. No one had called him that since his father died. For a moment, the noise of Las Vegas faded. He could almost hear his father's voice. Start where the ceiling became the sky. Daniel looked at the strip. A ceiling became the sky. He had no idea what that meant. Then a voice behind him said, Fremont Street. Daniel turned. A woman in her 60s stood nearby, wearing sunglasses and a red scarf. She held a cigarette she had not lit. Excuse me, Daniel said. Fremont Street experience, she said. They put a giant canopy over the street. Lights overhead, like the ceiling became the sky. Daniel folded the paper. Were you following me? She smiled. Not following. Watching. That's not better. No, she said. I suppose it isn't. Who are you? Ruth Bellamy. I was a stage singer at the Silver Ace in 1974. Daniel stared. The Silver Ace again. That name has a way of coming back. Did you know my father, too? I knew him when he was young and brave and too honest for this town. Daniel slipped the paper into his jacket. Everyone keeps telling me my father was involved in something dangerous. Nobody tells me the whole story. Ruth looked toward the Bellagio lake. That's because none of us had the whole story. Thomas made sure of it. He gave each person only one piece. Why? So nobody could betray all of it. Daniel laughed once bitterly. That sounds like my father trusted no one. Ruth shook her head. No, it means he trusted people enough to protect them from knowing too much. The fountains began. Music rose from hidden speakers. Water shot upward in perfect lines, twisting and falling like glass ribbons. Tourists stopped talking. Cameras lifted. Children pointed. For 3 minutes, the whole sidewalk seemed to breathe in rhythm with the lake. Ruth watched them for a moment. Your father loved machines, she said. He understood how things moved. Water, elevators, stage curtains, casino vaults. He always said every system had a rhythm if you listen long enough. What happened to him? Daniel asked. Ruth's face tightened. He found the ledger. And then men came looking for him. What men? Men who had too much money to be named and too little mercy to be forgotten. Daniel felt the old anger rising in him. Did they kill him? Ruth looked at him for a long moment. I don't know. It was not the answer he wanted, but it was the first honest answer anyone had given him. Ruth handed him a small card. On it was written, Fremont Street, Golden Horseshoe, Souvenir Shop. Ask for Marion. Go before dark, Ruth said. And Daniel. He looked at her. When you get close, people will notice. People like who? Ruth finally lit her cigarette. The kind who still believe secrets can stay buried. Chapter 4. The Fremont Street Trail. Fremont Street felt older than the Strip. The Strip was polished, massive, and bright enough to blind the desert. Fremont felt like it had stories hiding in the walls. Daniel arrived late in the afternoon. Above him stretched the new canopy of the Fremont Street Experience, a giant curved ceiling covered in lights. Even before the show began, it looked unreal. The ceiling became the sky. His father's clue had led him here. He passed old casinos with names that sounded like history. Golden Nugget Binions for Queens. Neon cowboys smiled down from signs. Tourists drifted in and out of doorways. Somewhere, an Elvis impersonator sang to a crowd. Daniel found the Golden Horseshoe souvenir shop, tucked between a casino entrance and a photo booth. Inside, shelves were packed with dice, shirts, postcards, magnets, playing cards, snow globes, and cheap sunglasses. An old woman behind the counter looked up. "You buying or hiding?" she asked. Daniel blinked. "Neither, I think." "Then you're lost." "I'm looking for Marion." The woman narrowed her eyes. "Who sent you?" "Ruth Bellamy." The woman's expression changed. Slowly, she reached beneath the counter and flipped the sign on the door from open to closed. "I was wondering when you'd show," she said. "You're Marion?" "Marion Pike. I ran cards at the Silver Ace when your father was still young enough to think truth mattered." Daniel sighed. "Did everyone in Las Vegas know my father?" "No," Marion said. "Only the people who owed him." She led him through a curtain behind the counter into a storage room stacked with boxes. On the back wall was an old framed photograph. 5 people stood in front of a small casino sign. Ruth was there, younger and smiling. Elias stood beside her. Marion too. And there in the middle was Daniel's father. Thomas Mercer looked about 30 years old, wearing jeans and a work shirt, one hand resting on a toolbox. Behind them was a neon sign. The Silver Ace. Daniel stepped closer. He had seen so few pictures of his father from before his marriage. This man looked different. Younger, leaner, confident, almost fearless. Marion tapped the glass. "That was taken 3 days before the fire." "What fire?" "The Silver Ace burned in August of 1974. Official story said faulty wiring. And the real story? Somebody wanted the basement gone." Daniel turned. "The ledger was in the basement." "Not exactly. The basement held the entrance." "To what?" Marion opened a drawer and removed an old deck of cards tied with string. "The tunnels." Daniel stared. "There are tunnels under Las Vegas." "Old service tunnels. Utility passages. Some legal, some not. Some built for deliveries, some for money, some for people who didn't want to be seen. Your father found one connected to the Silver Ace." She handed him the deck. "The next clue is inside." Daniel untied the string and spread the cards on a table. Every card was normal except the Ace of Spades. On its face, someone had drawn a tiny map in black ink. At the top were 3 words. "Follow the neon cowboy." Daniel looked at Marion. "Vegas Vic," she said. "The big cowboy sign." Daniel had passed it outside. Marion reached into another drawer and handed him a small flashlight and an old brass key. "Behind the cowboy there's an alley. At the end is a green door. This key opens it." Daniel hesitated. "What's behind the door?" "Away down. To the tunnels." Marion nodded. Daniel laughed nervously. "You people are really sending me under Las Vegas. You asked for the truth." "I ask for answers, not a death wish." Marion's face softened. "Your father was the best man I ever knew. He could have sold that ledger, could have made himself rich. Instead, he hid it because he believed someday the truth would matter. And now you decide if he was right." Daniel looked again at the photograph. His father stood beneath the Silver Ace sign, young and alive and smiling like the future had not caught up with him yet. Daniel took the key. Outside, Fremont Street was beginning to glow. The neon cowboy waved above the street, smiling forever. Daniel crossed through the crowd and found the alley behind the sign. The noise faded with every step. The bright lights became strips of color on brick walls. At the end of the alley stood a green metal door. Daniel tried the key. It turned. Behind the door was a narrow stairway leading down into darkness. He clicked on the flashlight. The beam touched concrete walls, old pipes, and dust. Then it found something scratched into the wall. An ace of spades. Beneath it were 4 words. Danny, keep going down. Chapter 5. The Silver Ace, 1974. 25 years earlier, the Silver Ace Casino did not appear in postcards. It was not grand enough. No fountains danced outside. No giant signs stretched into the sky. No celebrities walked through its doors unless they had taken a wrong turn or needed a quiet place to disappear. It sat along Fremont Street beneath a flickering silver ace of spades, squeezed between a diner and a pawn shop. Inside, cigarette smoke drifted beneath low ceilings. Slot machines chimed endlessly. A jazz trio played near the bar. The carpet was red, the walls were dark, and every mirror looked like it knew more than it was willing to tell. 28-year-old Thomas Mercer watched everything from the security podium. Thomas was not supposed to be there. 3 months earlier, he had been repairing electrical panels at another casino. But after helping stop a robbery attempt involving 2 drunken tourists and an unloaded revolver, the owner of the Silver Ace offered him better pay to keep an eye on the place and fix whatever broke. Thomas accepted, mostly because he enjoyed solving problems. The Silver Ace was full of problems. A leaking roof, a faulty boiler, doors that jammed, stage lights that overheated, a back hallway that smelled like rain even when the desert had gone dry for weeks. And then there was Milo Carradine. Milo insisted on practicing card tricks during work hours. He was the casino magician, though his show ran only 4 nights a week and only if enough people stayed after dinner. He wore a tuxedo with sleeves too long and carried more playing cards than money. "You know," Milo said one evening, producing a queen of hearts from Thomas's shirt pocket, "you'd make a decent magician." Thomas smiled. "I fix things." "Exactly. A magician fixes attention." Thomas shook his head. "I'll leave the tricks to you." Across the room, Ruth Bellamy rehearsed for her midnight performance. Her voice filled the casino, rich and steady, rising above the sound of slot machines. Marion Pike counted chips near the cashier's cage, fast as a machine and twice as sharp. Elias Vale argued with a bartender about baseball, waving a folded racing form like evidence in court. The Silver Ace felt less like a casino than a family that had agreed not to ask too many questions. Thomas liked that. He had not been in Las Vegas long, but he had learned that the city was full of people trying to become someone else. At the Silver Ace, people still used their real names, most of the time. On August 12, 1974, Thomas received a maintenance request for the basement level. Electrical issue, lights flickering near the storage rooms. He grabbed his flashlight and toolbox. The basement stairs creaked beneath his boots. At the bottom, he noticed something unusual. Fresh footprints in the dust. Someone had been there recently, but employees rarely entered the basement. Most storage had moved upstairs months earlier. Thomas followed the footprints past old liquor crates, broken chairs, and a stack of carpet rolls. The footprints ended at a brick wall. At least it looked like a brick wall. Closer inspection revealed hinges. A hidden doorway. Thomas pushed. The wall opened with a low scrape. Behind it stretched a tunnel, cooler than the basement and lined with older brick. He aimed his flashlight into the darkness and saw a metal cabinet sitting 20 feet inside, as if it had been waiting for him. The cabinet was unlocked. Inside rested a thick black ledger. Hundreds of handwritten pages, property records, land purchases, names, payments, casino investors, politicians, judges, People whose names appeared in newspapers every day. People who smiled at ribbon cuttings and claimed Las Vegas had been built honestly. Thomas understood immediately. Someone had hidden this for a reason. Someone wanted it forgotten. He closed the ledger. At that exact moment, footsteps echoed through the tunnel. Thomas grabbed the book, turned off his flashlight, and disappeared into the darkness between two old support columns. Two men entered from the far side of the tunnel. One carried a flashlight. The other carried a briefcase. "Where is it?" one man asked. "It should be in the cabinet." The cabinet opened. A pause. Then the first man cursed. Thomas held his breath. Sweat ran down his neck. The ledger felt heavy under his arm, not because of its weight, but because he knew what it meant. He waited until the men ran back the way they had come. Then he slipped through the tunnel, found another stairwell, and came out behind the casino near the dumpsters. That night he went to Elias first, then Ruth, then Marion, then Milo. He did not tell any one of them everything. He told each just enough. Elias would guard a key. Ruth would remember a location. Marion would hide a route. Milo would build a trick. Thomas would carry the danger. 3 nights later, the silver ace burned. Official cause, faulty wiring. Thomas never believed it. Neither did anyone else. Chapter 6. The Tunnel Beneath Fremont. Daniel stood at the top of the stairway with the flashlight shaking in his hand. Below him, the stairs disappeared into the dark. The message scratched into the wall seemed impossible. "Danny, keep going down." Only his father had called him Danny. For a moment, Daniel was 10 years old again, standing in the garage while his father laughed and told him that every machine had a rhythm. But now that voice was gone, replaced by the hum of pipes, the drip of water, and the distant sound of Fremont Street above him. He took 1 step down, then another. The air grew cooler. The neon noise faded until it became only a soft vibration in the ceiling. At the bottom of the stairs was a narrow concrete corridor. Old electrical boxes lined one wall. Rusted pipes ran along the other. The floor was dusty except for a faint trail where someone had walked not long ago. Daniel did not like that. He lifted the flashlight. On the wall ahead was another ace of spades, painted small and black. Beneath it was an arrow. He followed it. The tunnel bent left, then right. The farther he walked, the older everything looked. New pipes gave way to old brick. The concrete ceiling dipped lower. In places, the walls still held faded paint from signs that had been covered up decades ago. Then Daniel heard something behind him. A scrape. He turned quickly. The flashlight beam cut through the tunnel. Nothing. "Hello," he called. His voice sounded too loud. No answer. He kept walking. After another 30 feet, the tunnel opened into a small room. There was an old wooden table in the center. On it sat a metal box about the size of a shoebox. The box had no handle, only a slot in the front shaped like an ace of spades. Daniel reached into his pocket and removed the silver token Elias had given him. He placed it in the slot. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the box clicked. The lid opened. Inside was an old cassette tape, a folded photograph, and a playing card. Daniel picked up the photograph first. It showed his father standing beside a magician in a black tuxedo. Behind them was a stage curtain with silver stars stitched into the fabric. Written on the back were 4 words. Milo kept the trick. Daniel unfolded the playing card. It was the Queen of Hearts. Across the face were 3 words. "Find the magician." At the bottom was an address. The Desert Palm Apartments, Apartment 7B. Daniel slipped the items into his jacket. Then he heard footsteps. Not a scrape this time. Footsteps. Coming fast. Daniel turned off the flashlight. The tunnel went black. He held his breath. A beam of light appeared around the corner behind him. Someone was down here. A man's voice muttered, "He came through here." Another voice answered, "Find the box." Daniel's chest tightened. He backed toward the far side of the room and felt along the wall. His fingers found a metal latch. He pulled. A narrow maintenance door opened. Daniel slipped through and closed it behind him. The space beyond was tight and smelled like dust and hot wires. He moved sideways through the passage as the voices entered the room behind him. "The box is open," one man said. "Then he has it." "Who is he?" "A Mercer." Silence. Then the second man said, "I thought that name was finished." Daniel kept moving. At the end of the passage, a ladder led upward. He climbed as quietly as he could, pushed open a loose metal grate, and pulled himself into an alley behind a casino. Sunlight hit his face. He stumbled out into the noise of Fremont Street, breathing hard. People laughed around him. Music played. Neon buzzed. No one knew he had just run through a hidden tunnel under the city. Daniel looked back at the alley. Two men stepped out below the Vegas Vic sign. One wore a gray suit. The other wore a black shirt and dark sunglasses. They scanned the crowd. Daniel turned away and disappeared among the tourists. For the first time, the danger felt real. This was not just a story his father left behind. Someone else was still looking. Chapter 7: The Magician's Journal. The Desert Palm Apartments sat several blocks away from the Strip, in a part of Las Vegas where the buildings looked tired and the sidewalks were cracked from heat. Daniel arrived just before sunset. The building was 2 stories, beige, with iron railings and a small swimming pool that had more leaves than water. Apartment 7B had a brass knocker shaped like a rabbit. Daniel knocked twice. No answer. He knocked again. From inside came a voice. "If you're selling religion, I already got too much guilt." Daniel leaned toward the door. "I'm looking for Milo." The door opened 1 inch, and I looked out. "Who's asking?" "Daniel Mercer." The door opened all the way. The man standing there was thin, old, and dressed in a purple robe over pajamas. His white hair stuck out in every direction. He looked Daniel up and down. "You have his eyes," Milo said. "My father's." Thomas Mercer had eyes like a man who could see the wrong screw in a 100-piece machine. Milo stepped aside. "Come in before the hallway learns your name." The apartment was crowded with magic props. Card decks, mirrors, fake flowers, locked cabinets, a sawed-in-half box. Posters from old shows covered the walls. Milo pointed to a chair. "You found the tunnel." "Daniel, Saturday, 2 men followed me." Milo's face lost its humor. "Then they know you're here." "Who are they?" "Ghosts wearing expensive shoes." "That doesn't help me." "No," Milo said, "but it's true." Daniel placed the cassette tape, photograph, and Queen of Hearts on the table. Milo kept the trick. That's what the photo said. Milo stared at the items for a long moment. Then he walked to a cabinet and removed an old leather journal. "Your father came to me 3 nights before the silver ace burned," Milo said. "He said he needed a trick that could hide something in plain sight." "What something?" "A map. To the ledger." "To the place where the ledger could be found." Milo opened the journal. Inside were sketches of stage tricks and secret compartments. On 1 page was a drawing of a card box with a hidden flap. "Magic," Milo said, "is mostly about attention. People look where you tell them to look. Your father understood that better than most magicians." He turned another page. There was a drawing of a railroad map. Several lines crossed the page. One route was marked in red. Milo tapped it. Before the Strip became the Strip, Las Vegas was a railroad town. Old rail spurs, service roads, utility lines. Your father believed the Silver Ace ledger was moved through one of those routes after the fire. Moved where? To a vault beneath one of the big casinos. Daniel shook his head. "Which one?" "That's the trick." Milo removed a folded sheet from the back of the journal. "The map is incomplete. Your father split it into 3 parts." "Of course he did." Milo smiled. He was cautious. Annoying but cautious. Daniel unfolded the sheet. It showed part of a map with a red line beginning near Fremont Street and moving south. At the bottom was written, When Rome came to the desert, the old road passed beneath its crown. Daniel read it aloud. Rome came to the desert. Milo raised an eyebrow. Caesar's palace. Daniel looked at the map. The ledger is under Caesar's. Maybe. Or near it. Or your father wanted everyone to think that. Daniel rubbed his forehead. This is insane. Yes, Milo said, but it has survived 25 years, so insanity may be underrated. Daniel heard a car slow outside. Milo moved to the window and pulled the curtain back a quarter inch. His face hardened. Gray suit. Daniel asked, and black shirt. Milo said, They followed me. Milo took his arm. Listen carefully. There is a safety deposit box at the Desert Crown Bank. Box 1947. Your father left it under a name. What name? Milo handed him another plain card. The King of Clubs. On it was written, Elias Vale. Daniel looked at the card. Elias has the box. Elias has the key. Or he did. What do you mean did? Milo moved toward the back of the apartment and opened a closet. Inside was a narrow door. Old magician's escape hatch, Milo said. Daniel stared. You're kidding. I never kid when men in gray suits are outside. A loud knock hit the apartment door. Milo pushed Daniel toward the closet. Go. What about you? I'm an old magician. Disappearing is my business. The knock came again. Harder. Daniel climbed through the hidden door and down a short wooden ladder. It dropped him behind the apartment building near the pool. He looked back just once. From inside apartment 7B, he heard Milo shout cheerfully, If you break that door, you're paying for it. Daniel ran. Chapter 8, The Railroad Map. Daniel did not go back to the motel. By now, he was certain someone knew where he was staying. He found a diner near a truck stop and sat in the back booth with a cup of coffee he barely touched. The pieces of the mystery lay on the table in front of him. The silver token, the map page, the playing cards, the postcard, his father's message. He tried to put them in order. Silver ace, fire, tunnel's ledger, railroad route, Caesar's palace, desert crown bank, Elias Vale. Daniel felt like he was walking through a puzzle his father had built years before he ever knew Daniel would need it. Outside the diner window, Las Vegas glowed in the distance. A city of lights, a city of masks. His father had hidden truth inside it like a coin under a magician's palm. Daniel turned over the King of Clubs. Elias Vale. He needed Elias. But Elias had said Daniel would not find him until it was time. Daniel hated riddles. The waitress refilled his coffee. You look like a man who either lost money or found trouble, she said. Daniel gave a tired smile. Trouble. That lasts longer than money. After she left, Daniel noticed a newspaper rack near the entrance. The headline was about casino expansion and new development on the Strip. A smaller article, near the bottom, caught his eye. Local historian to speak on lost Las Vegas rail lines. Below it was a name, Professor Harold Finch. The lecture was that night at the Clark County Historical Society. Daniel checked his watch. He had 40 minutes. The Historical Society building was modest, quiet, and nearly empty. Inside, folding chairs had been arranged before a projector screen. About 12 people sat listening to a thin man in a brown suit talk about early Las Vegas. Daniel slipped into the back. Professor Finch clicked through slides. Before the casinos became the image of Las Vegas, Finch said, the railroad shaped the city. Tracks moved supplies, workers, money, and secrets. Daniel sat up. Finch continued. Many early casino properties relied on service corridors and delivery routes that no longer appear on public maps. Some were sealed, some were forgotten, and some, according to rumor, were repurposed. The slide changed. An old rail map appeared. Daniel's breath caught. It looked like the partial map in Milo's journal. After the lecture, Daniel approached Finch. Professor, I need to ask about this route. He showed him the map page. Finch's expression changed immediately. "Where did you get this?" "My father." "What was his name?" "Thomas Mercer." Finch removed his glasses. "Oh, you knew him too?" "No," Finch said carefully, "but I know the name." "How?" Finch looked around the room, then lowered his voice. "Thomas Mercer came to this building in 1970 for asking about sealed service routes under casino properties. 2 days later, the Silver Ace burned." Daniel felt a chill. "Do you know where this red line goes?" Finch studied the map. "It begins near Fremont, follows an old utility path, crosses beneath what became several strip properties, and ends somewhere around Caesar's Palace." Milo said the same. "Milo Carradine." Daniel nodded. Finch looked troubled. "If Milo sent you here, this is serious." "It got serious when 2 men started chasing me under Fremont." Finch folded the map and handed it back. "There was a rumor about a private vault built during early strip expansion. Not a bank vault, a holding vault, used to store documents before certain land deals were finalized." "Could a ledger be there?" "Yes." "Can you tell me where?" Finch walked to a file cabinet and unlocked it. He removed a rolled blueprint. "This was donated anonymously in 1982. I never proved it was real." He unrolled it across a table. It showed a section of underground service corridors near Caesar's Palace. One room was marked with a symbol, an ace of spades. Daniel stared. "My father marked this." "Maybe," Finch said, "but there is a problem." "What problem?" "The corridor entrance was sealed years ago. The only remaining access appears to connect through a private maintenance level." "Inside Caesar's Palace?" "Yes." Daniel laughed under his breath. "So I need to break into one of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas." "Not break in," Finch said. "Get invited into the wrong place." "How?" Finch reached into the blueprint tube and pulled out a small envelope. It was addressed to the son of Thomas Mercer. Daniel opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a safe deposit key and another note. "The bank opens the door. The door reveals the crown. The crown leads below Rome." Daniel looked at Finch. "Desert Crown Bank." Finch nodded. "And if I were you, I would go when they open." Daniel pocketed the key. Outside, thunder rolled over the desert. A summer storm was moving toward Las Vegas. For the first time since he arrived, the city lights flickered. Chapter 10. Thomas's last recording. Elias did not stop the tape right away. He turned it over, pressed another button, and let the machine run. More static crackled through the small room. Then Thomas Mercer spoke again. "Danny." The single word filled the room with so much memory that Daniel had to sit down. "If you're hearing this tape, then you've become a man. I wish I could have watched that happen. I wish I could have taught you to drive without your mother holding the dashboard like the car was falling off a cliff. I wish I could have embarrassed you at baseball games. I wish I could have met the woman you'll someday marry. I wish I could have given you advice you would have ignored until later." Thomas laughed softly. "Your mother hated baseball metaphors, but I used them anyway. She always said I could make any serious conversation sound like the 7th inning." Daniel smiled through tears. His father continued. "I met your mother in Virginia. She had no idea what Las Vegas really was. To her, Vegas was lights, shows, music, hotels, and people trying their luck. To me, it was unfinished business. I wanted to leave it behind, and for a while I did. You were born, and suddenly the world got smaller in the best way. I didn't care about old ledgers. I cared about getting home from work in time to hear you laugh." A long breath came through the tape. But old things do not always stay buried. Men came looking. Letters arrived with no return address. Cars parked too long near the house. Your mother saw more than I wanted her to see. I told myself I was protecting you both by staying quiet, but maybe silence is just another kind of fear. Daniel looked at Elias. The old man's eyes were down. When I found the ledger, Thomas said, I had choices. I could have sold it, destroyed it, hidden it forever. But every page represented someone who lost something. A diner owner, a mechanic, a widow, a family farm. People matter, Danny, even when powerful men pretend they don't. The tape hissed. I didn't save the ledger because I wanted revenge. I saved it because history deserves witnesses. Someday maybe you'll understand that. Maybe you'll decide the truth is too heavy and leave it where it lies. If you do, I forgive you. I never wanted your life to be swallowed by mine. Daniel lowered his head. But if you decide to finish this, then remember, don't confuse treasure with value. Gold can make a man rich, but truth can make him free. There was another pause. Whatever happens, know this. I loved you before you had a name. I loved you every day I had. And I am sorry for every answer I did not give you. The recorder clicked off. The room was silent except for the hum of the bank air conditioner. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Elias waited, giving him time. Finally, Daniel said, "He sounds like he knew he was dying." Elias nodded. He did. "Cancer." "Yes, he found out before he recorded that. He did not want you to remember him as sick." Daniel closed his eyes. "I remember him as gone." Elias sighed. "That is the one thing none of us could fix." Daniel picked up the crown medallion, the silver ace token, and the postcard. He looked at the three objects in his hand. Small things, ordinary things, but his father had built a door around them. "What happens after we find the ledger?" Daniel asked. Elias straightened his jacket. "Then we give it to people who can bring it into the light. And if Sterling gets there first..." Elias's face hardened. "Then he burns the past a second time." Chapter 11: The Charity Gala. By sunset, Daniel was wearing a borrowed tuxedo and walking through the front doors of Caesar's palace. The lobby was filled with marble, gold, flowers, and people who looked like they had never worried about bus tickets or motel rooms. Women wore diamonds. Men wore watches that probably cost more than Daniel's car. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. A string quartet played somewhere above the sound of polite laughter. Daniel moved through them with a postcard inside his jacket, the silver token in one pocket, and the brass crown in the other. Above him were painted ceilings made to look like open sky, blue paint, soft clouds, Roman columns, fake daylight in the middle of a casino. He stopped, where Caesar cannot see the sky. Not outside, inside, beneath the fake Roman sky. Across the lobby stood a statue of Caesar. Its stone eyes faced forward. Behind it was a velvet rope and a service door. Daniel walked toward it. He reached for the handle. Then a voice behind him said, "Mr. Mercer." Daniel turned slowly. The man in the gray suit stood 10 feet away. This time he was smiling. He appeared to be in his late 50s, tall, clean-shaven, and dressed in an expensive charcoal suit. The kind of man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Beside him stood the younger man in black sunglasses. Even indoors, even at night, the older man extended his hand. "Daniel Mercer." Daniel ignored it. "You seem to know me." "I knew your father. So does everyone else." The man chuckled. Thomas Mercer was difficult to forget. Daniel looked toward the service door. The older man noticed. "You really should stop chasing old stories." Daniel shrugged. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man leaned closer. "You found the tunnels. You met Marion. You spoke with Milo. You opened box 1947. Daniel finally spoke. "Who are you?" The man adjusted his cufflinks. "Richard Sterling." Daniel waited. "Nothing. No last name I've heard before." Sterling nodded. "Good." The younger man stepped forward. Sterling raised his hand. The younger man stopped. "Daniel," Sterling said, "your father was stubborn. He hid documents that never should have survived. He embarrassed important people. He cost investors millions." Daniel laughed. Investors. Sterling smiled. That sounds better than criminals. Daniel took a step closer. You killed him. Sterling shook his head. No, he died because he refused to let go. You expect me to believe that? No, I expect you to believe this. Sterling reached inside his jacket. Daniel tensed. Instead of a weapon, Sterling removed a photograph. Thomas Mercer, older, standing in front of Caesar's palace, taken in 1981. On the back were 4 words. Last chance to return it. Daniel looked up. Sterling was watching him carefully. Your father had opportunities, Sterling said. He chose this path. Sterling glanced toward the statue. You have 10 minutes. Daniel frowned. What? 10 minutes. Then security escorts you out, and the game ends. Sterling smiled again. Unless, of course, you actually find something. He turned away. The man in sunglasses followed. Daniel stood frozen. Why give him 10 minutes? Because Sterling already knew what was below, or because Sterling could not reach it himself. Daniel turned toward the Caesar statue. There had to be another clue. Then he remembered the postcard. Hold it to light when you stand where Caesar cannot see the sky. Daniel removed the postcard. Behind the statue was dim lighting. He lifted the postcard toward a lamp. At first nothing happened. Then faint lines appeared. Invisible ink. A drawing. A small circle. 3 dots. And a message. Truth stands at the feet of emperors. Daniel looked down. The statue rested on a marble platform. Near Caesar's sandal was a tiny hole, exactly the size of the brass crown medallion. Daniel inserted it. Click. The statue base shifted slightly. Behind it appeared a narrow opening, a staircase leading downward. Chapter 12, Beneath Rome. Daniel slipped inside. The passage closed behind him. Darkness, silence, dust. He turned on a maintenance light. The room below was ancient compared to the casino above. Concrete walls, steel beams, old electrical panels, wooden crates, boxes marked 1974. One crate had burned edges. Silver ace. Daniel walked farther, then stopped. At the end of the room stood a vault door. Large, round, heavy, like something from an old bank. On the center was an ace of spades. Beneath it were 3 slots. Coin, postcard, crown. Daniel inserted the silver ace token, then the brass crown. Finally, he slid the postcard into the center slot. Nothing happened. Then came a click. A low mechanical whir. Metal groaned. The vault slowly opened. Inside was not money, not gold, not jewels. Shelves. Hundreds of documents. Photographs. Ledgers. Newspapers. Boxes. And one envelope addressed simply, Daniel. His hands trembled. He opened it. Danny, if you are reading this, then you are standing exactly where I hoped you would someday stand. I know you probably hate me. I would understand. I hid too much. I left too many questions. But I wanted you to have a normal childhood. I wanted baseball games, birthdays, school dances, not tunnels, not secrets, not men who follow shadows. The Silver Ace Ledger contains proof that powerful people manipulated land purchases during the expansion of Las Vegas. People lost businesses. Families lost homes. Records disappeared. Money changed hands. I kept copies because someone needed to remember. Maybe no one will care anymore. Maybe everyone involved is already gone. But truth matters, even when it arrives late. You never needed to become me. I only wanted you to know who I was. Love, Dad. Daniel lowered the letter. Tears filled his eyes. 15 years. 15 years wondering. And now he finally knew. Then he heard applause. Slow, mocking. Richard Sterling stood in the doorway. Beautiful, Sterling said. Touching. Daniel folded the letter. You aren't getting this. Sterling stepped closer. I don't need all of it. Just the ledger. Daniel shook his head. No. Sterling sighed. You really are your father's son." The younger man reached toward Daniel. Then another voice echoed, "Step away from the boy." Elias. Behind him stood Ruth, Marion, and Milo. Milo carried a shovel. Marion held a flashlight. Ruth smiled. "We're getting too old for this," Ruth said. Sterling frowned. "Impossible." Elias tapped his cane. "Thomas planned for everything." Sterling looked around. "You think for senior citizens scare me?" Milo grinned. "No, but heart medication should." Sterling lunged. Milo swung the shovel. Sterling ducked. Marion sprayed pepper spray. Sterling screamed. The younger man charged. Elias stuck his cane between his legs. He crashed into boxes. Ruth laughed. "I've wanted to do that since 1974. Daniel grabbed the ledger and ran toward Elias. Behind them, alarms began to sound. Not casino alarms. Old alarms hidden inside the vault, wired by Thomas Mercer himself. Above them, footsteps thundered. For a moment Daniel imagined his father building this last defense years ago, smiling as he tightened screws and thinking, every system has a rhythm. And for the first time, Daniel felt like he could hear it too. Chapter 13, The Ledger. Police arrived 40 minutes later. Sterling was arrested. The younger man too. Investigators opened every box. The ledger was authenticated. Reporters arrived. Historians arrived. Lawyers arrived. Suddenly everyone cared. Daniel sat in a small conference room inside Caesar's palace, while two detectives asked questions. Elias did most of the talking. Ruth corrected him whenever he exaggerated. Marion refused to answer anything until someone brought coffee. Milo performed a card trick for a police officer who looked too tired to be impressed. The ledger sat on the table in a clear evidence bag. Daniel looked at it for a long time. It did not look powerful. It looked old. Black cover, worn corners, pages yellowed by time. But inside it were names and dates and numbers that connected people who had spent decades pretending not to know one another. Daniel carefully opened a copy that his father had made. Page after page contained stories, not just numbers. Stories. March 4th, 1968. A grocery store owner sold his property. Value, $30,000. Paid, $7,000. Difference transferred elsewhere. July 18th, 1970. A restaurant closed after mysterious permit violations. Property purchased 6 weeks later. Casino expansion announced before the ink was dry. October 2nd, 1972. A family refused to sell. Within months, water service stopped. Road access changed. Taxes increased. Eventually they left. Another page listed a widow whose small boarding house stood where a future parking structure would be built. Another told of a mechanic whose garage was declared unsafe after he refused an offer far below its value. Another mentioned a diner where railroad workers ate breakfast. Closed after inspectors suddenly found violations no one had noticed for 20 years. Daniel closed the book. This was not treasure. This was not hidden gold. It was evidence. Evidence that ordinary people mattered. Evidence that someone had remembered them. And Thomas Mercer had risked everything to preserve their stories. A reporter later asked Daniel what he felt when he found the ledger. Daniel thought of the postcard, the token, the tunnel, the fake sky over Caesar's palace. "I thought I was looking for my father," Daniel said. "I think he was trying to show me everyone else." That quote appeared in the newspaper 2 days later. For a while, Daniel hated seeing his name in print. Then he realized the story was no longer only his. It belonged to the families in the ledger. It belonged to Ruth, Marion, Milo, and Elias. It belonged to a small lost casino that nobody put on postcards. And it belonged to the father who had trusted his son with one last door. Chapter 14. The Truth About Thomas Mercer. Daniel sat outside Caesar's palace at sunrise. The night had finally emptied itself into morning. The strip looked tired, like a stage after the curtain dropped. Street cleaners moved along the curb. A few gamblers blinked in the new light. The sky turned pale over the desert. Elias joined him and lowered himself carefully onto the bench. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Daniel asked, "What really happened to my father?" Elias looked toward the strip. He wasn't murdered. Daniel listened. He was diagnosed with cancer in 1983. He knew he was dying. He decided to spend his final years protecting the evidence and protecting you from it. Daniel looked down. "He could have told me." Elias nodded. "Yes, but parents don't always know when protecting becomes hiding." Daniel smiled weakly. "Sounds like you knew him well." Elias chuckled. "He drove me crazy, but he was the bravest man I ever met." Daniel unfolded the letter again. He noticed something at the bottom. Tiny handwriting. "P.S. There is another silver ace token hidden in the garage toolbox. I knew you'd eventually look." Daniel laughed. The first real laugh in years. Elias smiled. "There he is." "Who?" Daniel asked. "Thomas's son." Daniel looked toward the hotels. For most of his life, he had thought grief was a room with no doors. Now he wondered if grief was more like Las Vegas itself, full of false fronts, hidden passages, strange lights, and old stories waiting underneath. Ruth, Marion, and Milo came out a few minutes later. Ruth had taken off her red scarf and tied it around her purse. Marion carried a paper bag of pastries. Milo had somehow obtained a deck of cards from a gift shop without paying for it, though he insisted he had simply relocated it for dramatic purposes. They sat together in the sunrise. Nobody said much. They did not need to. Some endings arrive with music and fireworks. Others arrive as 5 people sitting on a bench after a long night, sharing stale pastries while the city wakes up. For Daniel, this ending was enough. Chapter 15. One final night in Las Vegas. Daniel spent one final night walking Las Vegas. He could have left after the police finished their questions. He could have boarded the first bus home and returned to the quiet life he understood. But something kept him in the city one more night. Maybe it was the postcard. Maybe it was his father. Maybe it was the feeling that Las Vegas had not finished speaking. He began at the Bellagio Fountains. Water rose beneath the stars, climbing higher than seemed possible, then falling back into the lake in silver sheets. The music echoed over the sidewalk. Tourists stood shoulder to shoulder, all looking in the same direction. Daniel thought of Ruth telling him that water, machines, and vaults all had rhythm. He thought of his father listening for that rhythm. He thought of how many people walked past beauty every day without knowing what secrets rested under their feet. From there, he walked to the Eiffel Tower replica at the Paris Hotel. He stood beneath it where Elias had first appeared and changed everything. The tower glowed gold against the night. Daniel could almost see the old man sitting on the bench, cane across his knees, waiting for the son of Thomas Mercer. He continued toward Caesar's palace. The statue had been sealed again. Security guards watched the lobby, more closely now. To everyone else, it was still a hotel. To Daniel, it was a doorway his father had built across time. Later, he returned to Fremont Street. The canopy flashed overhead, turning the street blue, red, gold, and white. Music boomed from speakers. Neon Cowboy smiled. People looked up as if the ceiling really had become the sky. Daniel found the alley behind Vegas Vic, but the green door was locked again. He did not try the key. Some doors only needed to open once. He stopped outside the Golden Horseshoe souvenir shop. Marion had left a note taped inside the window. "Come back when you learn to shuffle." Daniel laughed. Near midnight, he walked past the Mirage volcano as flames rose into the dark and crowds cheered. He watched the fire reflect in hotel windows and thought about the Silver Ace burning in 1974. One fire had been built to entertain. Another had been set to erase. But the truth had survived both. As the night deepened, Daniel took a taxi to the Welcome to Las Vegas sign. The driver asked if he wanted a picture. Daniel said no. He only wanted a moment. He stood beside the sign and removed the postcard from his pocket. 15 years earlier, it had been a mystery. Now it was simply a message from a father who wanted his son to know the truth, a father who had made mistakes, a father who had loved him. Daniel looked at the sign. Lights blinked against the desert sky. Cars passed behind him. Somewhere far away, music played. "I get it now, Dad," he said. Then he slipped the postcard back into his pocket and watched the city shine one last time. Chapter 16: One Last Ride. 3 days later, Daniel boarded a bus leaving Las Vegas. The city glowed behind him. Bellagio Fountains danced in the distance. The Eiffel Tower sparkled. Palm trees swayed. The Strip stretched across the desert like a promise nobody could fully keep. Daniel reached into his pocket and felt the silver token, the original one, his father's. Before leaving, he had gone back to the motel, collected his duffel bag, and called home. There was no one there to answer, but he left a message on his own machine anyway. "It's me," he had said. "I found it. I found him too." Now, as the bus pulled away, he watched Las Vegas grow smaller through the window. He had come looking for answers. He found danger, tunnels, old friends, hidden maps, and a secret vault beneath a palace built to look like Rome. But more than anything, he found a fuller picture of Thomas Mercer. Not a perfect man, not a legend, a father, a man who fixed broken things, a man who made mistakes, a man who believed truth mattered, a man who left behind a postcard because he hoped his son would someday be brave enough to follow it. The desert slowly swallowed the lights. Daniel leaned his head against the window. In his lap was a small notebook he had bought at the bus station. On the first page, he wrote a title, "The Secret of the Silver Ace." Under it, he wrote the first line. The postcard had been in Daniel Mercer's life for 15 years. He smiled. Maybe someday he would tell the whole story. Maybe people would listen. Maybe they would not. But that no longer mattered as much as it once had. His father had protected the truth. Now, Daniel would remember it. Outside, morning spread across the Nevada desert. The city disappeared behind him, but its light remained in the glass, reflected faintly over his face. And somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the neon, beneath the old bones of Las Vegas, the ghost of the Silver Ace finally rested. The end. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this journey through Las Vegas and the secret of the Silver Ace. I hope you enjoyed watching this artwork come to life while listening to a story unfold at the same time. If you liked this combination of real-time pen plotting and storytelling, let me know in the comments. I'd love to create more adventures like this in other cities around the world. Maybe we'll uncover hidden secrets in Paris, solve a mystery in New York, or search for lost treasures in London. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves art, stories, or Las Vegas. Until next time, thanks for watching AI Draws the World, and I'll see you in the next drawing.